So if you look, obviously the artwork is trying to draw your eyes to the center because there's this massive circle and there's Jesus. So that is the whole point, and we'll talk about it in a second. That central message there of, I actually say 5 through 11, they say 6. This is the Messiah poem. It's what the whole book's pointing to. Let's jump right before that, though, and where he introduces this idea, where he starts to build up to the climax, the peak of this whole book of Philippians, is right here in chapter 1, verse 27, and we'll go through verse 4 of chapter 2. So, will someone read that to me? Or for me? To me is fine, too. Go ahead, Clint.
Well, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear you, standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened at anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict which you saw I had, and now bear, now hear that I still have. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So like I said, this is kind of the lead up where Paul is about to get into the main point, the whole idea of the book of Philippians, and he's starting to lead into that right here. So, live worthy of the gospel. We talked about that quite a bit when we did Philippians. Just that statement alone. I mean, how could you live worthy of the gospel? Live in such a way that's worthy of what Christ did for you. That's just craziness. I mean, there's no way we could ever do anything, or at least in our minds, I'm sure we all feel that way, that no matter how much good you did, how could it ever be worthy? But Paul tells them, let your manner of life be worthy. And how are you to do that? Stand firm in one spirit, one mind, strive side by side. So you can kind of tell he's really harping on, be unified. Quit thinking of yourself as an individual. This is not an individual work. Stand together, battle together, have the same mind, the same love. Focus on the group. Focus on each other. That's how you live worthy of the gospel. Paul also says, you want to complete my joy? Which that says a lot about Paul. Like, you want to make me the happiest that I could possibly be in this life. Same point. Have the same mind, have the same love, one mind, he emphasizes it again. And then, of course, look out not only for your own interests, but the interests of others. So as Paul leads into the climax of the book of Philippians, which is an awesome, positive book, he's saying, quit thinking about yourself. Quit thinking about you, think about others, and then he jumps into giving real hardcore examples of who lived this way. So he goes through 4. So he's saying, this is how you're going to be worthy of the gospel. Now here's 4 people that do that just to hammer in the point. So most of the book is spent on this concept and how you are to hammer in that point through the examples that we're about to look at, some of them. So you may remember, and I'll go back to it in a second, that big picture in the middle. They had 6 through 11. I have 5 through 11. His first example of this is, of course, Jesus. And so I do think it's important to read this one because this is the whole point of the book. So can I get one more reader to read these few verses real fast? Go ahead, Jason.
Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient, one of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Thanks, Jason. Okay. So, like I said, this is his first and most major point in illustrating all that he was trying to get at in the previous slide. And of course, it's the perfect example, which is Jesus. And so, let's just highlight a couple of these things. Christ did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. He took the form of a servant. We're going to see that word again later. It's important to know. This is doulos, this is slave. Lowest of the low, social hierarchy in Rome, start thinking stuff like that. This is bottom of the barrel, not what we'll look at for servant later. So he took the lowest of the low. He humbled himself all the way to the point of death. And because of that, God exalted him. Because of that, Christ is now seated at the right hand. So you want that esteem and that exaltation like Diotrephes wanted last week? You don't get it by looking at yourself. You get it by humbling yourself, emptying yourself just like Christ did, focusing on each other, not on yourself. That's where the true exaltation comes from. The perfect example of what Paul's trying to get at is Christ. So let's go back to this. Let me get my little pointer thing. I've never had this clicker before. Okay, so we introduced it here. First example was Christ. We go through two more examples in chapter 2. Second one is Timothy. We all know who Timothy is. He was a beast, right? Paul's right-hand man, like a son to Paul. Third example, Epaphroditus. Fourth example, Paul. So, you might can see why I'm wanting to highlight where he's at in this letter. Paul is saying, hey, you want to live worthy of the gospel? You want to complete my joy? Live this way. Live like Jesus. Live like Timothy. Live like me, Paul. Live like Epaphroditus. This dude is on an elite list, is what I'm getting at. 4 guys on this list. One of them, some of us may have not ever even heard his name until today. But he's on that same list with Jesus, with Paul, and with Timothy. And what I want to highlight about that more than anything is, besides the fact that a lot of us haven't heard of him, obviously, all right, let's look at Jesus. Jesus, we can look at him and say, yeah, I know, I need to live like Jesus. But man, he was in the form of God. He came down to earth. He could do miracles. He still had that view. He knew what heaven was like. We can make all these excuses of why we can't achieve what Jesus achieved. We can look at Timothy and say, yeah, this dude was right there with Paul at his right hand. He had spiritual gifts, all of these awesome things about Timothy. I don't know that I could live that way. We could look at Paul and say, this dude had Jesus meet him on the road to Damascus, blind him. I mean, if I had something like that happen to me, yeah, I'm gonna really get after it for the gospel. How could you not? We could make the same excuse for all of the apostles. We could look at Peter and Luke and John and all these guys and say, they were right there with Jesus. They saw him. They worked with him. Of course they're going to be able to live this way. I don't have any of that. And I feel like Epaphroditus really puts us on that level. This man didn't have spiritual miraculous gifts. This wasn't an apostle in the form of like Paul and the other apostles. He was not Jesus. He was not Paul's right-hand man. He was simply a congregational member. We don't even believe, from what I've read, most don't believe he was even an elder. Maybe he was a deacon. That's a servant. This dude was just like us today. He had never seen Jesus. He was just a churchgoer. And he lives in such a way that he's put on a list with Christ, with Paul, with Timothy, and so we can too. We can live in such a way that Paul, Christ, they look at us as equals. That we live and we are equal because of the way that we put others first and we bury ourselves. And that's the main thing that I wanted to, if you don't remember anything else from this lesson, just remember Epaphroditus is just like us, and he was put on a list with Christ, with Paul, and with Timothy. And the key to the whole book of Philippians is quit worrying about yourself and worry about others. So if you want that, which we all should, I would imagine everyone here would want that, That's what we have to do. Quit worrying about yourself and start worrying about the group as a whole. Okay, I've talked a lot. Does anyone have any comments or questions or things they wanted to bring up in what we've talked about so far? Speechless. Caleb, let's hear it.
This goes back a few minutes from where you're talking, but I really appreciate how you highlighted even just the simple difficulty of the trip that Epaphroditus made to go to Rome. And I think sometimes it's easy to just, read through and it might be a sentence like, Epaphroditus visited me. And we take for granted how simple and easy travel is for us.
Yeah.
Or even simple things like sending money to people, where you can
Yeah.
do it on your phone in 5 seconds. I think part of a deeper, more rich Bible study is understanding those concepts.
Right.
And not taking that for granted. So I just appreciate how you
Yeah,
highlight that.
and it is. It's so easy to take stuff like that for granted. Because, we hear Philippi, we think everything's over in that region where it's it could be up over there in a half a second. But for them, it took forever. And that was a huge sacrifice. This man obviously had a job, he had a family, and he left them for weeks carrying money like that through a horrible environment. Yeah, it's so easy to gloss over that. So I appreciate that, you highlighting that again too. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so now let's get back to the actual text, and we're going to quickly go through some of the attributes that are talked about with Epaphroditus. Okay, so there are 5 things that he's described as. Epaphroditus, he's a brother, he's a fellow worker, he's a fellow soldier, he's a messenger, and he's a minister. Obviously, you could probably do a sermon on each one of those points. You absolutely could on the 5 of them. We're not going to be able to talk tons about them, but I do want to just hit a few things really quickly with them. So we've all heard all these words, so I'm not going to belabor this. It's also important to know that every definition I'm going to have up here I'm pretty much just going to read it and we'll move on, and they are Thayer. I might have a thing or two to say about them, but I don't want to spend too much time. Okay. So brother, fellow worker, fellow soldier, messenger, and minister. Brother, we all know what that is. Fellow believer, united to another by the bond of affection. It's how we refer to each other as Christians. We're bound together because of our love and our devotion to Christ. And we know that's an extremely strong relationship. And Epaphroditus is a brother. He's also a fellow worker, so that's just one who labors with another in furthering the cause of Christ. Paul's saying, yep, this dude works with me. We are the same. We'll talk about that a little bit more. He is on my level, and we have the same goal. So he's working with me. He's my fellow worker. Fellow soldier, we've seen some of this with some of the other guys that we've talked about. It's an associate in labors and conflicts for the cause of Christ. One thing that's important, this is also a secular term, which not all of these are. We see this word in other Greek writings, and if they talked about it, it was usually a ranking official high in the military said, that is my fellow soldier, and it was taking a more common low soldier and elevating them to his same position of rank. And so I think it's important to know that, because Paul is saying, look, I'm not like commander-in-chief, and this is, the little guy on the bottom and the front lines. Epaphroditus is a fellow soldier. He is just like me. We have the same goal, fellow worker, but we also have the same enemy, and we're fighting those same people together as equals. That's an important point. Messenger. We know this word. It is from the Greek apostolos. It's not apostle like we would think as far as, the 12, but it is a delegate, a messenger, one sent forth with orders. Nothing crazy there. Obviously, we know he brought forth a message from the Philippians to Paul and then back to them. And in his daily life, too, he's a messenger for the gospel. Minister. All right, that's one that I want to talk a little bit more about. So, liturgon, or however you say that. You could notice, could anyone tell me what might be the root word there in liturgon? Looking at you, Rodney.
I'm looking at it.
So think, what?
The ergon, the energy work.
Oh, maybe. It's not what I was going for. So no. I'm thinking like liturgy. So basically, like I said earlier, there are the word servant. If you have your Bibles, yours might say servant instead of minister. We're not talking doulos is the main point I'm getting at. Doulos was slave, low, nothing, bond servant. This is more servant, minister in a religious sense. That's why liturgy is that root word. So in the Old Testament, the Greek rendering of the Old Testament, this word's used all the time for the priests. So he was a servant for God is basically what Paul is saying.
That the second part is ergon, which means to be employed to work, the idea of effort, labor.
Yeah.
And that is the second part.
Gotcha. So yes, that idea of energy and labor for God, like in a religious sense, is really the main thing that I was wanting to get at. Is this is not your typical term. All right, now shout out to the book. We're going to talk about it for just a second. Did anyone read it? The material? Okay, so you probably would agree. The whole thing talks about this prefix, sin. That's the whole book. That's all it talked about, which is a great point. I wouldn't have considered it without a book, so I'm not like just knocking the book because I wouldn't have considered it. I just felt like there was a lot more we needed to talk about with him. So this Greek prefix, sin, we see it on these two words. Like I said, that's the primary focus of the lesson material. We will talk about it now for, we'll say like 5 minutes maybe. So this prefix brings forth the idea of togetherness, of cooperation, doing something with someone else. And Paul used words a lot with this prefix. And the book even says that there's a guy named Ralph Earl. Forgive me, I don't know if I should know that name, but I don't. But Ralph Earl said that there are over 175 compound words in the New Testament that use this prefix, and many of which are found nowhere else in the world except in Paul's writings. So one of the main things that the book's trying to get across is Paul made up words. I mean, we have words all the time that are nowhere else, and he's basically taken this prefix, which might be SYS or SYN or SYM. We know like synagogue, symphony. We have words that we can relate to this idea of togetherness. But basically, he took this, he put it on a word, and just made it a new word. It wasn't anywhere else. And it really should speak to the Greek readers in general because these aren't words they ever saw. So why is he doing this? Because he's trying to tie together that idea of togetherness and unity in our everyday words. The book went through numerous examples. I only want to look at one, and it's from Romans 8. So, can I get another reader? Read these couple verses. Mason, go ahead.
The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified.
Okay. So we might read that, and we could probably, now that we're really looking for it, find where these sin, S-Y-N words are. But there's 4 of them in just those 2 verses. This is why I kind of wanted to include this one. The first one, I'm not even going to try. If someone wants to try and pronounce these, be my guest. But bears witness with our spirit. That's the word over there on the side that I'm not going to try and say. Second one, fellow heirs with Christ. That looks even more complicated to say. Third one, suffer with him. Not going to try. And glorified with him. Yeah, that's an X in it. We're not even going to even look at that one much longer. Okay, so all this to say, Paul is looking, let's just talk this verse in general. So yeah, we've kind of hit on, he adds this to the words, makes them up, just to make us feel like, hey, you've got it. We really have to emphasize togetherness, working together, cooperating, one another, all of this through making up words by adding this SYN or SYM or SYS as we saw in the previous word. But in this particular passage, and one of the reasons I wanted to use it, is he's basically saying, hey, you want to be glorified with him? What do you have to do? You have to suffer with him. should be tying back to Philippians in your brain at least. You want that glorification. You know, the world teaches these self-help, self-exaltation. Look out for yourself. You know, we see it all the time. God says the opposite. You want true glory? You want to be raised with Christ? You want that exaltation that everyone is wanting? You get it by the complete opposite. Lower yourself. Quit worrying about you. It's not all about you. It's about everybody else. The unity of the brethren, having the same mind, putting each other first instead of ourselves. That's how we reach this glorification with Christ. Whatever Christ experienced in his suffering, we can expect that. Whatever belongs to Christ, we're fellow heirs with him. How awesome is that? So we will be able to inherit those same things that Christ has if we become partakers with him in his suffering, taking up our cross daily. Then we can have the expectation to be glorified with him. So the point in all of this, and I'm going to open it up in just a second, is, you know, Paul continuously emphasizes throughout the New Testament togetherness, cooperation. Quit worrying about you, worry about each other. Focus on togetherness instead of yourself as an individual. And I do think the book pointed that out really well in talking about these prefixes. Mason.
One thing that I noticed just with Paul's writing in general and the way he talks about Epaphroditus, and I think it was Archippus that Art did, he calls them fellow soldiers. And so many of the things that Paul writes about is like referring to the message, spreading the message of the gospel as a kind of warfare, fight the good fight, he says in Timothy, and I think in 2 Corinthians he says the weapons of our warfare, we take down divine powers and strongholds in this way. And just if we all approach our daily life as soldiers in this way, where as a soldier, you're giving up so much, you are expecting suffering. And I think I'm starting to see now how Paul always refers to the people he glorifies as soldiers, and then also just his mindset about how we are to live as Christians, or should be the mindset of warfare as soldiers, which I don't think we live in my daily life thinking about I'm at war in the spirit, but
yeah, we definitely should. Yeah, I think it's so easy for us to separate ourselves from that spiritual realm in today's world. Our minds are so busied with other things where it's all so much earthly. But yeah, these guys, they had a very good knowledge of the spiritual realm, the battles that were taking place, Satan wanting to have you, and it would help a lot if we could change our mindset to think more on these spiritual things. All right, so we got like 7 minutes. I told you I had too much material. We're going to keep rolling. So I thought I'd have more time for this when I put this slide together, but basically these are those 5 words. What I wanted to point out here is these first 3 are referred to in relation to Paul, and the second 2 are in relation to the Philippians. What I mean by that is, if you go back to the passage, Paul says, Epaphroditus is my brother, my fellow worker, my fellow soldier. He is your messenger, and he is your minister. And the key point that I'm trying to get at in that is Paul really looked at him as an equal. Paul looked at him as a brother, someone that worked with him, and someone that fought with him, completely equal. So Paul viewed this guy as legit. He really liked Epaphroditus. He loved him, and so did the Philippians. Obviously, if we were going to send somebody to wherever to carry a message from the Church of Christ at Colonial Heights, we're probably not going to choose Kean, someone that can't do it, right? They chose someone that was one of their most trusted, someone that would represent them well as a whole. So Paul really looked at him as a legit dude, and so did the Philippians. Rodney, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think about the connection between those two as well. The fact that this man was willing to be, that chose to be a minister and was willing to be their messenger in the danger, made him therefore a fellow soldier, worker, brother Paul in connection with that. It was the initial commitment that bled over into this connection with Paul.
Yeah.
That, you think about
awesome. Yeah. Yep, it would be. It would be awesome. Any other comments while I'm pausing for a second? Okay. So one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because if Paul looked at him so highly and so valuable, why does he say, I've thought it was necessary to send him to you? He's so valuable to Paul. Why is he sending him back? Go ahead, Rodney.
Because he cared about his brother, and he couldn't let them sit. I mean, we get on the phone, we are camping, and we could get on the phone and call those people.
Right.
And say, hey, he's fine.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that.
Right.
And they're worried.
Big time.
He said, I care enough about these brethren that I give this guy to see.
Exactly. I think it speaks so highly of both Paul and Epaphroditus in that. Because like Rodney said, he tells you, it's because he's been longing for you all, and he's distressed because you heard that he was ill. What on earth? So this guy walks and sails 750, 800 miles. We've talked about it. Hostile territory. Gets super sick. We don't know exactly what, but almost dies in verse 29 and 30. He nearly died for the work of Christ. Somehow, the Philippian brethren get word of this. And who's Epaphroditus worried about? He's worried about them. He's not worried about himself. He almost died. Just keep that in mind. And to go back to them, another 750, 800 miles. Can you imagine being somewhere where you are sick? You have just busted it for the gospel. You've gone through this treacherous journey. You almost die. You are sitting there sick as a dog, and you hear they're worried about you. Most of us probably be like, yeah, I figure. Of course they're worried about me. I'm worried about me. I'm almost dead. But that worry, their worry for him, he's like, Paul, listen, man, I love you. I love the work that we're doing, but they're worried about me. I got to get home. I got to go back. I got to go tell them, hey, I'm okay. Rodney?
I thought about, too, how long must he have been there?
I know.
To get that word, just somehow get back.
Yeah, we know it had to be months.
Yeah.
Because he was sick enough if he got sick day one and they sent word, it would take 4 to 6 weeks for that word to get back. But it not only got to them, it got back again where he heard, oh, they know, and they're worried about me. And can you imagine that? I mean, he is completely embodying what Paul is trying to get at in Philippians. He's not worried about himself. He's not worried about Epaphroditus. He's worried about his brethren, and that's why he's on this list. That's why he's mentioned with Paul and Timothy and Jesus, because his primary focus, his brethren. All right, Rich is already back there. I got like 2 minutes. Conclusion stuff. I really don't have a lot here, so we'll just bust through it. In conclusion, I think the point is, I'm hoping you all can see this was a great man. This was a good dude. And the main reason is because he's not worried about himself. He's worried about others. He loves his brethren far more than he loves himself. And because of that, he's mentioned alongside these guys. So Epaphroditus, he was a brother. He was a fellow worker, fellow soldier, a messenger, and a minister. And that main point, too, that I want to get across is you could easily put your name there. See what I did? Your name here. So you can your name can be listed along with these same guys because he was a congregational member at a church in Philippi. Nothing crazy special about him in the sense of miracles or walking with Jesus. He was just a dude, just like us. And we can achieve that too if we just follow his example and the example of Christ, Paul, and Timothy. Okay. I've spoke a lot this time. I'm sorry. Does anyone have any final remarks or comments, questions, concerns? Debbie?
I just feel like we should all have that same mindset. They had a synergistic relationship, and they were in lockstep with each other,
Yeah,
the whole group.
for sure. Yeah.
We should do that, and it has to
Isn't it crazy that we live in a world where we're so much more connected through phones and all of these things like Rodney was mentioning? But when you look at stuff like this, you feel much more disconnected than they were. Like, what made it different for them? Their unity was so strong. It's time. We have to put in the time and the effort to get to know one another, to get that unity, to strive together and become one mind and one love. Buddy?
I'm swapping with Daryl, so Wednesday we will do the next one, and we'll do those that quit, but we'll do that Wednesday. And if you want to prepare, read Jeremiah 15.
There you go. I was curious who was going next, but there you go. It's Wednesday, not Sunday. All right, that's a good way to conclude. Well, I appreciate everyone's comments and thoughts. You're dismissed.